Abroad now, the Egyptian president urged the United Nations Security Council to adopt a resolution allowing for international military intervention in Libya. It comes after his country launched airstrikes against Islamic State-affiliated targets there following the beheadings of 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians. Let's bring in Mattia Toaldo, who's a policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations, joins us from our central London studio. Mattia, very good morning to you. Libya is in effect in a state of civil war. The Islamists have seized large swathes of the country, including Tripoli. Indeed, Sirte, the hometown of Colonel Gaddafi himself, recently fell to the Islamists. The money's going to run out pretty soon. There are mass beheadings. Some people are scratching their heads and thinking, you know what, maybe it would have been better if Muammar Gaddafi had stayed in power. What do you say?
Well, actually, what we're seeing today is partially also the rotten fruits of 42 years of Gaddafi's rule, who was himself a great sponsor of terrorism, just remember Lockerbie, and who freed many of these jihadis between 2009 and the civil war in 2011. So I wouldn't say we were better off with Gaddafi. I would say that Gaddafi actually prepared the ground for what we're seeing today.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's not to in any way denigrate his capacity for mischief-making. I interviewed Colonel Gaddafi in Tripoli back in 2009, and we talked about Lockerbie, but at least he was somebody you could talk to. Indeed, Tony Blair talked to him at length and managed to get him to give up his weapons of mass destruction. There's no talking to Islamic State. In fact, there's not really any reporting Islamic State because Western journalists are too terrified, for the most part, to go there.
That's absolutely true, and we should be very concerned about the spread of Islamic State in Libya. But there are Libyans to which we should talk. There are ongoing UN talks led by Bernardino Leon. And I think unless we have a national unity government that really rallies the country against ISIS, we're not going to defeat ISIS. This is the takeaway from Iraq, that unless you have an inclusive political agenda that rallies the country against terrorists, you're not going to defeat them.
Well, you could argue one of the lessons from Iraq as well is to make sure you back neighbours who are willing to do the right thing, and that would mean backing the Egyptians who are willing to send in fighter jets and perhaps other forces, perhaps even ultimately ground forces too, to take on Islamic State.
I think, there are two options there. Either you back Egypt in its intervention into Libya, which has been ongoing for some time and it's become public after these beheadings. And in that case, you're actually siding into the civil war and fighting against all the enemies of the internationally recognized government. The other option is to have a peace deal and then have a peacekeeping mission which assists the national unity government in its fight against ISIS. I think the second option, given our experience in the region, could be more effective.
Are you surprised how little introspection there has been in the West about Libya, in particular the seeming inability after Gaddafi had gone to build any kind of consensus, political consensus there, to make sure that the West was involved? I mean, the parallels, you talk about Iraq and the parallels with the vacuum that followed after the invasion of Iraq, but equally a vacuum existed in Libya, didn't it? After the NATO bombers did their work, there was nothing else.
Absolutely, but bear in mind that keeping boots on the ground or putting boots on the ground in 2011 was very difficult. First of all, because the new Libyan authorities refused that. Russia and China would have opposed that, as they did with Syria. I think more than introspection, we need to think about what we can do in the future. I think Libya is in this state, first of all, because there were warlords there, and they're still there, and they call the shots, and also because regional powers didn't really help. There are still new weapons coming to Libya, and Libya really doesn't need any new weapons.
OK. Mattia Toaldo, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts this morning. Thanks a lot.